Hello there everybody and welcome to SA Anatomy, and this is Savvy. For this video we're going to be working on fat pads. We're not going to be doing any sculpting. You can work on these fat pads via sculpting, but we're just going to model them out. I'm going to show you some tips and some tricks on how to get some of these shapes done, and then we're just going to use some subdivision modifiers, shrink wrap modifier and a solidify modifier. So it's just going to be really easy. There's not going to be any sculpting. So just get some of your reference images, get whatever reference images you can find, and let's get started. So I've already worked on most of the fat pads, well actually all of the fat pads that we're going to be working on for this video, for the male and the female. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you how I made them. So we're just going to be remaking all of these fat pads. I'm just going to hide them here, put them in their own collection. So the male fat pads, they're going to be labeled under the male collection. So they're going to be falling under there just the same as the female fat pads. They're just going to be the same. And then for the new ones, I'm just going to try and remake everything the same way that I did before. Obviously, the mistakes that I've made before whilst working on this project for the first time, you won't really see them because I've already done like experiments. I've already made many mistakes whilst trying to figure out how to work on these fat pads in a much quicker way. So fortunately for you guys, you'll just be watching the refined version of this entire process. So the reason why I said that we're going to be using shrink wrap and solidify and a subdivision modifier, all those modifiers, is because as I was experimenting, I was trying to figure out which way is faster to get these fat pads done. Seeing that we're just going to be modeling these things out, I started by using the shrink wrap modifier and trying to figure out if I could just get the form right to like at least follow the shape of the body as well. So we're just going to start with a simple plane. We're going to move it into position. Right now we're just going to be working on the abdominal fat pad. So getting it into position is really easy. You don't really have to get it in front of the body. It's just we're going to, on the shrink wrap modifier, we're going to use the project option. It's just easier to have it in front of the body so that when we start editing, it's much quicker and much easier for us to know where this fat pad or where this base shape is. So we don't have to go around looking for it and hiding objects and all that. For others, we are going to move them inside the body because they won't really require a shrink wrap modifier. But for major ones like really large, the large fat pads or the large shapes, we're just gonna use the shrink wrap modifier method, and this is how it is. You start off with just a mirror modifier. That's if you want the other side to be as symmetrical as possible. Then you add a shrink wrap modifier, well, a subdivision modifier first, and then afterwards you would go in and add a shrink wrap modifier. And then using project, make sure that the negative and positive are checked. And then you can see that it will wrap onto the body in a much finer shape. It'll have like a better shape than like using the base shrink wrap modifier options. And then we add in a solidify modifier. Also with the order of these modifiers, the reason why we're going to add a solidify modifier after the shrink wrap and then we're going to add in one more subdivision modifiers, because we don't want these sharp edges or like these really hard edges whilst using the solidify modifier. So using the subdivision modifier, it smooths everything out. You can see here, if I moved it at the top, you can see it just keeps like a really sharp edge, and that's not what we really want. So we're going to move the subdivision modifier below the solidify. Afterwards, you can come in and add a shade smooth, or well, it should just be shade smooth. You are not going to use shade by angles, or if you're using your previous version of Blender, I believe it's called shade auto smooth. So we're not going to be using that. We're going to be using just the normal shade smooth, and then you can just move up and down just to manipulate the shape. And with the order of these modifiers, it should feel a lot easier to get the shape of the fat pad onto the body. And then afterwards, if you feel like there needs to be some editing and all that, you can just apply all the modifiers if you feel like you're done, and then just move the shrink wrap modifier inside the body, or like the mesh inside the body, not the shrink wrap modifier, but the mesh inside the body, because the shrink wrap modifier will try to target the surface. So we can go in and edit that later. It's also important to name all your fat pads whilst you're working on the individual ones. You don't want to name all of them afterwards, because it's just going to be tedious to try and name them each one by one. It's going to be like really irritating. So now that you understand the process, I'm just going to speed things up in this video. Now we're just going to try and do everything really quickly. So the process is just going to be the same for all the other fat pads. You can see here with the infrapatella fat pad, which is going to do the same thing, but in this one we're not going to use the shrink wrap modifier, because like I said before, some fat pads are just going to be placed inside the body without the shrink wrap modifier. And then we're going to do the same thing with the popliteal. I hope I said that correctly. The popliteal. And then also the Kager's fat pad. So those ones aren't really going to use a shrink wrap modifier. You can with a Kager's fat pad. I do believe that you can. You just have to figure out how to get it right, because there's two on one leg and two on the other. So you're just going to have really janky ones on each side, I believe. But you're just going to have to figure out how to do it with the shrink wrap modifier if you wanted to do it that way. So most of these fat pads, the reason why I had to explain properly in the beginning was because the fat pads, the process for making these fat pads are just going to be the same. We're going to add in a mirror modifier, a subdivision modifier, then a solidify, a shrink wrap first, and then a solidify, and then one more shrink wrap, and then it's just going to be the same all around. So all these fat pads are going to have that kind of modifier layout. So it's even going to be the same for the female. Actually, for the female, I'm just going to duplicate a lot and then move it over and then just readjust some proportions and some shapes. Some others I'm going to recreate from scratch, but others I'm just going to duplicate them and then move them to the side, such as the abdominal fat pad or the pubic fat pads, especially the face fat pads that are found on the face. I'm just going to duplicate all of that, because recreating it piece by piece it's a big hassle. It's going to be just really irritating to work on. So it's much easier to just duplicate whatever you already have that exists and then move it over and just readjust shapes and just clean up and refine whatever you can. A great thing to do with this process, seeing that we're using the shrink wrap modifier a lot, just understanding your edge flow a little, or understanding how edge flow works, really helps with this entire process. Also, you will see that there are times where the solidify modifier just kind of has it solidifies outwards, and we could kind of see the fat pad extruding outside of the main mesh. So that's usually because of your normals. So just check your normals. If you see anything that's just extruding outwards, select your mesh and then just hit Control-N or Alt-N for the menu, and just flip normals or flip to outwards or whatever, recalculate to outwards, and you will just find that it will fix itself eventually. Using proportional editing at some point really did help, because it's much easier to just move everything as a group rather than just moving it piece by piece and trying to figure out why things work and all that. And I didn't really, if you can see here, I'm just duplicating like vertices and then extruding them outwards, and then separating the mesh and then just calling them a separate fat pad name. This is because I don't want to do the whole entire process of adding in a large plain shape and then sizing it down and then redoing the shape over and over again for all these pads on the face. It will just be extremely tedious. It's just gonna irritate me. So all I did was just whatever shape I felt like I could steal from another fat pad, I just took like the vertice, the edge loop, extruded outwards just to get a plane, and then separated that mesh, called it its own separate name, such as the mental over here, the mental fat pads, or the lateral orbital, and then I just reshaped the entire mesh to fit that one fat pad using proportional editing as well. So now, right, you can see that we are done with the male fat pads. Now I'm just applying modifiers and I'm refining things, just changing things where I can. Like I've said before, just once you're done, just go back in and just try to refine wherever you can and just fix things. Check your namings, check the proportions, check whether things are overlapping with one another. And then right here, we're just gonna move over the female fat pads that I've already created before, and then we're gonna make entirely new ones, also using the ones from the male fat pads. So I'm just gonna delete some geometry here and then just redo the entire shape using stroke grab modifiers and solidifies and a subdivision modifier to just kind of reshape everything a lot quicker. So it's basically just once you have one body done, you can duplicate most of your stuff over to the next one, because the fat pad orientations and the shapes and the proportions are quite the same. They're very similar, but at the end of it, you will see like the major differences. You'll see a lot of similarities, but you'll also notice where things are really different, where you'd see that the female has a much larger posterior gluteal fat pad, whereas the male doesn't really have much. You'll see a lot of details that you wouldn't really see in the male, or you'll see male details you wouldn't see in the females. So such as the face. Right at the end of this, you'll just zoom out a little and look at the face of your characters. You'll see that the female's face is a lot thinner or a lot smaller than the male's. The male one is much wider, especially around the neck. So there's a lot of stuff that are similar. It's just the same as when you're working with muscle groups. You'll find that most muscle groups are similar. It's just the proportions and the size and everything are just are different. By the way, you don't necessarily really have to follow this entire process of the adding in the modifiers in a specific way. Whatever works for you is totally fine. I'm just here to show you, or guide you at least, to try and help you find out, okay, how do these fat pads really form, the type of size, the kind of shape, such as the posterior upper arm fat pads you can see over here. At first, I made the mistake of covering the entire arm, thinking that it was just the entire back arm, to only find out that it's actually just this one little side. So I'm just here to showcase how you can get these done in a much quicker way. If you have a new process that works for you, that's much easier. For example, if you're used to using geometry nodes and you know how to make this entire process, or this process that I just showed you right now, obsolete, you have a new way that's like much quicker and much better, then all power to you. You can go ahead. But this is just the way that I did it. Now I'm just, for example, right here, I'm just applying things, all the modifiers that I've added, and then I'm just readjusting shapes. Like I said before, the female's head is much smaller than the male's, or much less wider. So you can see the type of shape that the female has versus the males. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found this interesting. I will see you in the next one.